In the dawning days of computer gaming, a genre was taking shape, borrowing from the grand narratives of fantasy literature and the intricate mechanics of tabletop role-playing games. Before the sprawling worlds of the Elder Scrolls or the epic sagas of Final Fantasy, there was a pioneer, a game that dared to dream bigger, to offer an entire world for players to explore. This was 1981, and Richard Garriot, known to many as Lord British, unleashed upon the world a game that would forever alter the landscape of interactive entertainment. Ultima. Later known as Ultima I, the First Age of Darkness. It wasn't just a game. It was a promise of adventure, a testament to the power of imagination, and a foundational pillar of what we now know as a computer role-playing game. Today, we delve deep into the origins of this legendary series, exploring Ultima I, its revolutionary design, its quirky charm, and its enduring legacy, all structured to give you a complete picture of this groundbreaking title. Akalabeth, also known as Ultima Zero, is considered one of the first computer RPGs ever made. A passion project by a young student named Richard Garriot, it featured a limited open world, a top-down view, overworld exploration, and 3D dungeon crawling. It was, by today's definition, a roguelike, and pioneered many of these aspects. So, when Ultima 1 came out just a year later, was it more of the same? Not really. While Ultima 1 features the same dungeons, it also boasts a much better and more engaging overworld exploration, cities, castles, surface roaming monsters to fight on land and sea, navigable seas, and a land speeder at dogfighting TIE fighters in space. The more the merrier, I guess. Welcome to Avrengost Games. I'm a completionist gamer who mainly plays RPGs. One morning, I woke up and thought, I named my channel after my Ultima Online character from an era ago. I should really play the games belonging to that series. Also, I need to know and experience the basics, the very beginnings of the genre that influenced everything that came later. Otherwise, I feel like a scam selling winning lottery numbers on some remote TV channels almost no one watches. I've experienced some of the later Ultima games in my youth, but I've never played the very first ones. So, I needed to start from the beginning. What exactly is Ultima I, the First Age of Darkness? At its core, it's a pioneering computer role-playing game released in 1981 for the Apple II, and later ported to numerous other systems like the Commodore 64, IBM PC, and Atari 8-bit. It's not just the first game in the legendary Ultima series, but a crucial stepping stone in the entire CRPG genre. Developed by Richard Garriot and Kenneth W. Arnold, and published by California Pacific, initially was just called Ultima, since there were no plans to make a series out of it. I never played this game before. I wasn't even born in 1981, but I'm glad to have experienced it. Once you get its quirks and accept the simple fact that it's a very old game, it reveals itself as quite fun. It's easily available on GOG in a ready-to-play version for modern machines. I bought the whole collection of like 14 Ultima games on sale for €12 and some change. Definitely a bargain. The game transports players to the fantastical world of Sosaria, a realm under siege by the tyrannical wizard Mondane. Your goal, as the valiant hero, is to defeat him and restore peace to the land. Pretty classic epic fantasy. But this is no simple hack and slash. Ultima 1 introduced concepts that were truly revolutionary for its time. It offered an expansive overworld to explore, character customization, distinct towns and castles to visit, and both overworld and first-person dungeon combat. And, in a twist that defines its unique charm, it blended traditional high fantasy with an unexpected touch of science fiction, but we'll get to that. The setting of this game is a little weird, featuring classic high fantasy elements like orcs, evil knights, castles, kings, and quests to fulfill for them, alongside forests and seas to traverse. Yet, it also has those sci-fi elements I mentioned. This might feel out of place, but it strangely fits if we consider that Richard Garriot would later create a company with his brother. It would be named Origin Systems and develop and publish masterpieces in both the fantasy and sci-fi genres, the Ultima and Wing Commander series. If you want to try Ultima and you feel lost, something that can easily happen with all games that don't hold your hand, there are plenty of walkthroughs and guides online. I'll link some of them in the video description, among these video sources. As said, the Ultima series has a previous Germinal game, Akalabeth, which I covered in a previous video, since I wanted to start from the very beginning of the series. You might want to check it out, I'd be grateful if you did. I think having played it before this one gave me a deeper insight into the evolution Ultima represents from its predecessor. Since Akalabeth sold 30,000 copies and scored very well with the growing legions of computer gamers, the subsequent Ultima took off with a sprint. print, selling 50,000 copies. Those were good numbers back then, as not everyone had a personal computer at home. Ultima I may seem primitive today, but it was surprisingly mature for its time. It broadened the open-world feature that the Calabeth had, evolving its graphics. You find lots of towns and castles in this world, which spans 4 different continents. Your character, the stranger, can finally develop their attributes and improve their equipment, something lacking before. You still delve into wireframe 3D dungeons, probably the best part of a Calabeth, and it was maintained. But now those dungeons levels are easier to navigate once you understand how they're built, and there is a wider monster variety. Also, you're not forced to delve into them too much. The overworld action is very present and perhaps even more fun, or at least it was for me. Being Ultima an old game, you, of course, have to read the manual. It's graphically pleasing and well written, presenting the game elements from a role-playing perspective. It introduces the game by telling you how the world of Sosaria is in peril. Hordes of monsters created by the evil wizard Mondain threaten the good people of these lands, while the nobles bicker among themselves and are incapable of handling the situation. It's up to you to be the stalwart hero this world needs. I usually do multiple playthroughs of the games I cover to experience them from different angles. I think this gives me some credibility. While you can agree or disagree with what I say, at least you know it comes from experience. But to be honest, I don't think this game requires multiple playthroughs. I tried to be Naughty and steal, or murder Lord British, but he was invincible. I could fight some guards, but that was it. I think this game is definitely made toward being the good guy, and the experience doesn't change that much playing a fighter, a wizard, a cleric, or a thief. It's true you can do little different things, like casting 4 different spells reserved for wizards, or having a higher chance of stealing. But these features are not that useful, and every class can do pretty much everything, and every character can max their attributes and cast the useful spells. I eventually fulfilled my completionist need by reaching the maximum values in all attributes and experience, while owning all the possible transportation means. In essence, Ultima I was a kitchen sink of ideas, pulling from fantasy literature, tabletop RPGs, and even sci-fi. It wasn't perfect, but its ambition laid the groundwork for decades of RPG innovation. Without further ado, let's dive into Ultima I, the First Age of Darkness. To truly appreciate Ultima I, we need to understand its origins and the mind behind it. Richard Garriot, affectionately known as Lord British. Growing up fascinated by Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and the rising phenomenon of Dungeons and Dragons, Garriot began programming his own D&D style games on his high school mainframe computer and later on his Apple II. His first commercial success, A Calabeth World of Doom, released in 1980, was essentially a collection of Warframe first-person dungeons. While simple, it proved the viability of computer RPGs and established Garriot's unique designing style. I went into these details in the previous game's video. The success of A Calabeth emboldened Garriot. He saw the potential for something far grander than disconnected dungeons. He envisioned a persistent, explorable world, a design philosophy that would eventually define the Ultima series. He poured his passion into creating this new game, working in his closet while his girlfriends watched him write code, driven by a vision of an entire fantasy world. I've never met such patient ladies, so he must have been very lucky. I had a small controversy reported as a curiosity in my video on A Calabeth regarding its publication year. In another interview with Richard Garriot that I'd watched for this video, I found a solution. The man himself said that Calabeth is from 1980, not 1979, and Ultima is from 1981, and sometimes it gets confused. So that's settled. Ultima was developed in 1980, and California Pacific registered the copyright for it in the same year, but it was officially released in June 1981. I already covered Richard Garriot's youth in the Calabeth video, so I won't repeat it all here. Let's just say he was a very determined and precocious programmer for his age. He started developing RPG games on punched cards for teletype terminals when he was in high school. He kept redeveloping small games over and over again, feeling he learned more with every new one, and that he could do better. Eventually, he moved on to developing an Apple Basic for an Apple II computer, and that's how A Calabeth was born. At a summer job at Computerland, his boss saw the game, convinced him to package it, and sell it in the store. But California Pacific, one of the first publishers in the industry, managed to get a copy and chose to officially publish it on a large scale. While attending his freshman college year, Richard Garriot developed Ultima, following the success of the previous game. Initially, the game was going to be called Ultimatum, but the publisher found out that there was a tabletop game with that name, so for copyright reasons, they changed the name to Ultima. During development, Garriott felt he liked the Calabeth dungeon system. It was the first 3D dungeon system after all, but wasn't as fond of the open world part. He wanted to do better, but the Apple Basic programming language wasn't cut out for drawing the overworld tileset grid he had in mind. Ken Arnold, a former Computerland employee and Garriott's friend, came to the rescue and wrote a routine in assembly language which fetched the tiles and quickly painted them on the screen as the character moved around in the world. If you ever taken an assembly class, like me, you have at least a vague idea of what an accomplishment this was. The main reason to use assembly is because it's really fast, but it's also quite agonizing to write and debug. As Garriott recalls, they had to draw the tiles on graph paper, convert those graphs into binary, and they had to be reversed because the pixels appeared backward on the screen. Then they had to convert the binary into hexadecimal, insert the tile as data, store it on disk, and then test it. I can see how this process was very painful. I'm sure there were a lot of workarounds, and that code might not be very elegant. But then I remember these guys were pioneers. There were no classes about software development and programming back then. They had to discover a lot of things by themselves, and as often happens, there was no one gatekeeping you. There were no university professors telling you your code wasn't good enough while they had no developed successes under their belt. Gaming isn't made from pedantic classes. Have a look at Undertale's code. In my eyes, this speaks volumes about the passion and determination Richard Garriot and Ken Arnold had, and makes their accomplishment truly remarkable. Ultima I saw several iterations, most notably the original 1981 Apple II version and a significant 1986 remake. The remake, published by Origin System itself, featured enhanced graphics, more varied town layouts, the original towns were all identical, and slightly refined gameplay, making it the version most commonly played today. There are a bajillion versions of Ultima. The version I played, the GOG one, is the 1986 remake for PC, probably the best one to play nowadays. I don't know why GOG reports December 31, 1989 as the release date. This version has updated graphics using the 16-color EGA palette, different town and castle maps, and better icons, or sprites, however you want to call them, for the character and NPCs. There are no loading times, so the gameplay is considerably faster than with other versions. If you're not the kind of retro gamer who wants and can play it on original Apple II or one of the old Japanese computers, this is the way to go. Controls in Ultima 1 are entirely keyboard-driven, a hallmark of early computer games. Movement is handled by arrow keys or the numeric keypad. Interaction with the world, combat, and spellcasting are all performed by pressing single-letter commands. The game comes with the manual in PDF, as usual, but it's missing the maps and the quick reference card. There was no explanation for the controls, so I had to look for them elsewhere. GOG lists some of these as extras, but since the package comprises all three original games, they include them for Ultima 2 and 3, but not for the first one. The Anchor manual, with the controls, maps, and the quick reference document, can be easily found on the internet. Links are below. Ultima uses the same base controls a Calabeth did, and expands on them. Besides the usual A for attack and C for casting a spell, you no longer have to specify the initial of the weapon or spell to use. You have a ready command, R, to choose your weapon, armor, and spell to use once for all. I won't bore you by listing all of them. I'll just say that the most interesting or new ones are B for boarding a transportation vehicle and X for exiting it. I don't know why there are two different commands for opening coffins and chests in dungeons. Maybe they refer to different scripts. You have to press O to open a coffin and U to unlock a chest. I stands for inform and search. It's useful to know which continent, city, or castle you are in, and to find secret doors in dungeons. By the way, finding those secret doors isn't mandatory. The dungeons are perfectly serviceable without looking for them. There are dedicated commands for the space section, like V to change view and H to activate the hyperjump. Some commands I never used, like drop, and the game played a dirty trick on me by making me use the get command in the final battle, something I never had to use before in the whole game. While seemingly cumbersome by modern standards, this direct command system was intuitive for its time and allowed for quick interactions with the game world. The game also featured an interesting lag time setting, allowing players to adjust the speed of monster attacks, a rudimentary accessibility feature demonstrating Garriott's early consideration for player experience. As a last curiosity, I'll mention that the game has 5 executables, each dedicated to a specific part of the game. Some are bigger than others. Our adventure begins with character creation, a foundational RPG element. Players choose from 4 races: human, elf, dwarf, and hobbit, a clear nod to Tolkien's hobbits, maybe renamed for legal reasons. You'll immediately see that we have a full complement of 6 attributes instead of the 4 in a Calabeth. Change stamina with constitution, and we have the D&D standard array. You start with 10 in each of them, and have 30 points to distribute, to a maximum score of 25. Race and class will change these values. This time I won't bore you with formulas. I'm not even sure they stay the same in all the game's versions. For example, according to the source I found, I should have had a decent chance of killing a king, but that never happened despite my continuous and heavy-hitting attacks. Since you could soft-lock yourself doing so, I think they might have made the kings invincible in the 1986 DOS version. It would make sense. I don't really know, so I'll tread lightly. The formulas for the attributes seems to be different from a Calabeth, and there are different formulas for combat in the overworld, in dungeons, in cities, and in Mondane's final fight. The core logic remains the same though. Strength influences how much damage your attack will do. Agility your chance to hit. Stamina, along with your armor, determines your chances to be hit and how many drinks you can have at the pub before being seduced and robbed. Charisma dictates the price a vendor will pay for the items you're selling them. Wisdom influences the price of spells, the damage you do with the magic missile spell, and again, the possibility of being seduced and robbed in bars. Intelligence determines the prices for armor and weapons, transport systems, food, chance of success for casting spells for non-clerics, they always succeed, and magic missiles' odds of hitting. And again, its damage. Each of these attributes can be raised to 99, and it's a nice thing to do that will make the final fight a walk in the park. Yes, I support the ancient art of overleveling. Then you choose your race, taking into consideration that humans have +5 intelligence, elves +5 agility, dwarves +5 strength, and hobbits, the fake version of hobbits, have +10 wisdom but -5 strength. Next, you select a class: fighter, cleric, wizard, or thief. A fighter gets +10 in strength and agility, a cleric +10 in wisdom, a wizard +10 in intelligence, and a thief +10 in agility. You may notice there is an asymmetry here. Clerics have 1 dedicated spell, prayer, and can't fail to cast spells. Wizards have 4 dedicated spells: blink, create, destroy, and kill. Thieves have an increased chance at stealing. I think the attributes asymmetry for the fighter was justified in Garriott's mind due to the extra features other classes have. Sadly, these features are not very useful. By popular belief, the best ways to experience this game are through a dwarven fighter or a human wizard. You'll also find an RP presentation of each race and class in the manual, showing Richard Garriot's role-player background. Contrary to a Calabeth, Ultima has a progression system, even if it's a weird one. You have 10 experience levels to unlock, 1 for every 1000 experience points. They do nothing, except spawn more and stronger monsters. The real progression is determined by your hit points and attributes. HPs are a collectible resource, if you will. As in a Calabeth, you can raise them by killing monsters in a dungeon or by making monetary offers to kings. This was a nice change of pace, because you can gather quite a lot of money fighting monsters on the overworld and buy your HP, instead of dungeon delving all the time like in the previous game. You can also drop coins in fountains or ponds for various rewards, but it's an unreliable way of getting what you want. Attributes, except strength, are raised by visiting signposts along the coast of the 4 continents. They will gradually increase more and more, so it's not a terrible grind. Strength, instead, is gained by completing king's quests. Half of the kings, when you offer service to them, will order you to visit a specific location marked by a signpost. Do it, go back, and they'll raise your strength as a reward. The problem is that this raise gets lower and lower the higher your strength score is, leading to a terrible grind. Nonetheless, this awakened the old MMO player in me, and I grinded like there was no tomorrow to get my 99 in strength. Gold is earned primarily through combat and finding treasure in dungeons. This creates a constant loop of adventuring, accumulating wealth, and then investing turning that wealth into making your character stronger to tackle tougher challenges. Equipment is crucial for progression and can be bought at various merchants in the cities. The latest best weapons, labeled futuristic weapons, can only be found at the Pillars of the Argonauts. More on this later. The story in Ultima is quite bare bones, but it's a step forward from Akalabeth. In the previous game, you just had to kill a series of monsters by delving into a dungeon. Spoilers, I guess, for a 44-year-old game. In Ultima, the first 2 pages of the manual clearly tell you that you have to kill the evil wizard Mondane. But how? The game starts by dumping you in the wilderness. It stands to reason you have to find a city to equip yourself and possibly buy some food before dying of starvation. Luckily, Lord British's castle and the misspelled city of Britain are near. In case you don't know, Lord British was Richard Garriot's pen and paper RPG character, and he put it in the game. In the city, you buy chainmail and a mace to protect yourself, and the Lord himself gives you a quest to find a specific place. Now what? All games didn't hold your hand. I tried for a bit to play Ultima blind, but modern games made me weak. I had some fun wandering around, killing monsters, buying some food and a horse. After a while of this, I was completely lost. I knew that pubs were supposed to give you hints, so I went drinking but didn't find clear clues. To cut the story short, luckily, nowadays there are a bajillion walkthroughs for this game. Essentially, like in life, you have to grind your way to the top. Kill monsters, buy better armor and weapons, means of transportation, and do the king's quests. Once I had a direction, the game was fun again. As said, half of the king's quests will send you to specific locations where a signpost sits. Interact with it, go back, and they'll reward you. These missions are repeatable, and that's how I maxed my attributes. Obviously, there is no journal in the game, so you need to have a good memory or write down who sent you where. The other half of the kings will repeat a Calabeth game loop. They tell you to kill a monster found in a dungeon. There are plenty of dungeons, but I delved into the nearest one, Montor, near the city of Pose, because you just need one. The monsters you have to kill in sequence are a gelatinous cube, a carrion creeper, a lich, and a balrog, and they can be found at increasingly deeper levels. I've lost so many armors to that nasty gelatinous cube, but the rest isn't so bad, provided you pimp up your character with other missions. Also, buy an air car as soon as you can. It will speed up your travels, lower your food consumption, and it has guns to fight enemies on sea and land. In this part of the game, you'll enter the castle of Shamino, who was another Richard Garriot's character, this time the one from the Society of Creative Anachronism. Every time you return to a king after having killed one of these monsters, they will reward you with a colored gem and will also give you vague instructions on what to do next. They will tell you that you need 4 gems for operating a time machine, then that the time machine is essential to defeat Mondane, then that princesses are particularly helpful to a space ace. I didn't ask for what, but my mind ran. At this point, you should have thoroughly exploited the Pillars of the Argonauts to get the best weapon, the blaster. We buy a vacuum or a reflect suit, if we don't already have one, to not suffocate in space. Buy a space shuttle, yes, there are NASA space shuttle in Sosaria, and take off. This is a whole new sub-game, the part I least enjoyed in Ultima, mainly because you can't save and can die in a number of manners before killing 20 enemy ships. Once, I died failing to maneuver to dock at a space station, got stuck, and took continuous damage. You can change a ship at a space station, choosing between two. One has more shields, the other more fuel. If you deplete shields or fuel, you're dead. You can replenish them by docking at the space stations. In combat, it's very hard to aim and fire. There's delay when you do it. Anyway, kill 20 TIE fighters and board the space shuttle back to Sosaria. Keep count because the game doesn't do it for you. You are a space ace now and have to free a princess. Why those kings, even the benevolent Lord British, keep those ladies in jail is never explained. Maybe the Lord had a daughter, she squandered everything in clubs and drugs, and he had to confine her for her own safety? I don't know. Murder the jester in cold blood and take the key he's telling everyone he has. The entire castle goes ballistic, so run to the princess's jail and try to free her. It may not be the right key, so flee the castle and start again. If you're lucky and the key works, run to the exit, killing maybe only a couple of innocent guards who were doing their job. These last 2 parts of the game, the space and princess ones, can be a little upsetting. Once freed, the princess will reward you with HP, food and money, and she will tell you where the time machine is. Go there, board it, use the gems, and fight Mondane in the past. Now, it's never really explained, but Mundane was invincible due to the Gem of Immortality. You go back in time to fight him while he's creating it, so grab it, using Get, a command you most likely never used elsewhere in the game, and go ham on the mage. If you've maxed everything out, it's not a difficult encounter. When severely wounded, he will transform into a bat and try to run and regenerate. Don't give him time to do that, and congratulations, you won the game. As I said at the beginning, it's not a particularly intricate story, but it's an evolution of the previous game, which essentially had none. One of Ultima's most significant innovations was its sprawling, persistent overworld map, and I think the overworld exploration is the part I enjoyed the most in this game. Dungeons can be fun, but I had my fair share of them in Akalabeth, and those in Ultima are pretty much the same, with a more approachable layout and a better enemy variety. The world is divided into 4 continents, each with 2 castles and 8 towns. Every castle and city on the same continent has a different map, at least in this version of the game. I believe the original version had one map for every castle and one for every city. This sense of a continuous explorable world was revolutionary for its time, a stark contrast to the disconnected levels of many contemporaries. Unlike Akalabeth, these settlements are now populated, symbolically clearly. But now we can see guards, jesters, kings, princesses, and shopkeepers. The guards react if you do something bad, like stealing or killing. Dungeons are presented in a first-person perspective, reminiscent of Akalabeth. They are dark, labyrinthine mazes filled with powerful monsters, treasures, and hidden passages. Navigating these dungeons requires careful mapping, often done on graph paper by players themselves, and a keen eye for traps and secret doors. But dungeons in Ultima have a more consistent layout than in Akalabeth. You can download templates and map them. At a certain point, you have access to ladder down and ladder up spells, so you don't need to do it anymore. Dungeons all have 10 levels, and with the exceptions of the first and last one, the ladders are always in the same place, switched every level. They are procedurally generated at the beginning of the game, so in a single playthrough, you're always going to conveniently encounter the same maps. Monsters spawn at very specific levels. For example, the gelatinous cube is always on levels 3 and 4, the carrion creeper always on levels 5 and 6, and so on. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it gets, as you might imagine. You'll also find coffins and chests only in dungeons. Besides treasures, the coffin can spawn a monster and the chest can be trapped. The amount of damage you can take from the trap, even with subsequent attempts, makes the chest not really worth it. There are plenty of dungeons in the world, but as I said before, you just need one to complete the quests kings will give you. I chose the nearest one to Lord British's castle for convenience, Montor, which is also very close to the city of Pose, so I had my services at hand. Shops are very well presented in the manual, directing you to the pub for information. They know you're most likely going to need hints. Weapon shops come in 2 different kinds, each selling different weapons. All of them, including armor, magic, and transportation shops, expand their inventory as you level up. Some shops have interesting names. Legend has it that Richard Garriot inserted his friends' names in them. I think I saw a Julia's shop somewhere. It's a companion's recurring name in the series. As said, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma influence the prices you get for buying and selling. But it's not a big deal, since you easily gain money by fighting the droves of monsters the overworld throws at you. The higher your level, the more monsters you'll find, and they're more powerful. I guess this was a way to simulate a sort of doom clock, telling you that Mundane was proceeding in his endeavor, and the world was becoming more and more dangerous. I loved that, this time, proper and classic currencies from pen and paper RPGs were introduced. A gold coin is worth 10 silver, a silver 10 copper, and the game automatically converts everything to copper in your bottom right. It's clean and clear. Speaking of transportation, buying some means for traveling faster is an incredible boon. I tried them all for fancies, but as a rule of thumb, save and buy the air car as soon as you can. It looks like a land speeder from Star Wars. It sprints through land and sea and has lasers for fighting. It can pass through forests and mountains, but it's not a big deal and it's still incredibly useful. Rafts and frigates can only be bought in coastal cities, which makes sense. Still, the air car is superior. Ultima I still has an obsession with food, like Akalabeth, but, wisely, Richard Garriot turned off food consumption in dungeons this time. Adding that you don't consume food in towns and castles made the mechanic way less burdensome than in the previous game. The space section is a sub-game inside the main game. During this part of Ultima, you have to explore different sectors through hyperjump, finding enemy craft to destroy. Even if this part doesn't click very well with the rest of the game, the manual has a nice explanation for it, mentioning enemies from the stars and ancient manuscripts depicting blueprints. Before fighting Mundane, or during the whole game if you're the adventurous type, you'll run from signpost to signpost, increasing your attributes, bettering your weapons, and doing quests for the kings. The signposts are very special places indeed. Annotated maps of all kinds exist, along with tables explaining what every single one of them does. Even when I was grinding my attributes from signpost to castle and from castle to signpost, I often stopped to fight enemies on the way. I loved zooming around in my air car and shooting lasers at sea monsters and enemies on the coastline. It was fun. I feel this is the better part of the game. This open world design, however rudimentary, instilled a powerful sense of freedom and discovery that few games could match in those years. Combat has three different aspects in Ultima, depending on whether you are in the overworld, in a dungeon, or in space. Technically, combat in the settlements is different since it uses different formulas, so maybe it has four aspects, but gameplay-wise, it's very similar to the overworld one. In the open world, you just approach an enemy, or are approached by one, press A to attack, and select the direction. If you're using a ranged weapon, you can shoot up to 3 spaces away, including your own. You ready your weapons and armor with R, and shoot from the frigate or the air car with F. Enemies can hit you diagonally, but you can't. That was a little unfair. You can only attack up and down, left and right. You may even get ambushed by hidden archers when you're near the forest. You can see their little white eyes among the trees. In dungeons, the view goes from top down to 3D, but the concept remains the same. Attack with A, but just in front of you, using the weapon or spell you've readied. Monsters can spawn and attack you from your flanks and rear, but generally, the experience is less punishing than in Akalabeth. Fewer mobs of monsters converge on you. Space combat is the part I least enjoyed, as I've already said. You move the crosshair with the arrow keys and press F to fire. There's a delay, and it's quite hard to aim, while enemy fighters are pretty fast in their maneuvers. Your ship's shield becomes your hit points, and it's fuel the food. Probably the worst part of it is that you can't save the game. To do so, you have to go back to the space station, board the shuttle again, and go back to Cesaria. It wasn't a great experience for me. Richard Garriot said that he developed this part of the game to fill all the available space on disk. I'm just glad this doesn't come up again later in the series. Equipment is limited by today's standards, but it's a big step up from the previous game. Not all of it is super useful, but I'm glad it's there. The bow and arrows, pistol, phaser, and blaster are ranged weapons. The rest are melee. The amulet, the wand, the staff, and the triangle are weapons for spellcasters. They increase the damage the magic missile spell does. The rope and spikes were used to cross pits in dungeons, but in this version of the game there are none, so they're useless. The pistol, the light sword, the phaser, and the blaster cannot be bought in shops. They are found at the Pillars of the Argonauts signpost. It always gives you the weakest weapon that is not in your inventory, meaning you have to visit it numerous times to get the blaster. To my understanding, tradition dictates buying a mace at the beginning of the game, a great sword as soon as you can, then run into the Argonauts to get the blaster. Armors don't reduce the damage you take, but the possibility of being hit. It works as D&D's armor class. I've lost so many of them to the gelatinous cube, it was dirty. Again, the tradition seems to be, buy a chainmail immediately, upgrade as you can, but get the reflex suit as soon as possible. You'll need a vacuum or reflex suit to survive the space part of the game. I've already talked about transportation in the exploration section, but your vehicles appear in the stats screen, so I guess they're equipment too. I said to buy an air car as soon as you can, and you're set. It even shoots. Not sure if the vehicle damage scales with your strength though, and I haven't found any source on this. I know my spell part of this section will probably be lacking, but as told in other videos, I don't particularly enjoy playing spellcasters. I've used plenty of utility spells, for example the ladder ones, but not much of the offensive ones. Considering that in Ultima spells are consumables, I don't even see how I would buy hundreds of them to hurl at my enemies. Using a weapon is more convenient and cheaper, and since a wizard can raise their strength and agility to 99 like everyone else, there is no reason not to simply use the blaster. The cleric's spell is too unreliable to use, and the wizard's ones are not that useful either. Blink is too random, magical barriers can easily be avoided. I don't know. If you played a wizard in this game and found it incredibly useful, let me know in the comments. While Ultima's graphics feels primitive today, it looks much better than Akalabeth. This is mainly due to what some called its major technical innovation, tile graphics. The overworld is drawn using pre-rendered tiles of 14 by 16 pixels, the painful implementation of which I already explained. Each world screen is composed of 200 of those tiles, 20 columns by 10 rows. The entire world map is a grid of numbers, and each number represents a tile to be slotted by the graphics engine. We have a limited number of tiles representing grassland, mountains, forests, seawater, towns, castles, and even monsters. I don't know if we can call them sprites yet. They're like a couple of tiles representing the monster in different positions, and the engine swaps them, giving the illusion of movement. I don't want to repeat another Todd Howard joke, but at those times it was a pretty good solution that worked. It goes without saying that the Apple II graphics software libraries were not very mature at this point. It's generally claimed that Ultima was the first game to implement this technique, which later was widely used in 1980s games. I already said it, but talking about graphics, I need to address the fact that the air car and the enemy spacecraft really seem taken from Star Wars. They actually are land speeders and TIE fighters. Come on. Sound in Ultima 1 is, as expected for an early 8-bit title, quite rudimentary. Most interactions are accompanied by simple beeps, boops, and clicks. There is no background music during gameplay, only short fanfares for specific events. The sounds are still pretty archaic, much like in Akalabeth. It's incredible to see how the graphics leaped forward while the sounds didn't. This is probably mostly due to the very limited sound capabilities of the Apple II. In an interview, Richard Garriot said that the sound routines were also written in assembly, like the graphic engine. The reason behind this is again speed and easy access to machine functions, I think, given the fact that at those times they most likely didn't have language-specific libraries to manipulate the core computer functions for them. Enjoy the sounds of terrible slaughter. Despite the technical limitations, Ultima 1 managed to create a surprisingly immersive experience, proving that compelling gameplay and imaginative world building could triumph over advanced graphics and sound. Ultima 1, the first Age of Darkness, was far from perfect. It was a product of its time, with rough edges, a steep learning curve, and a plot that often required outside materials to fully grasp. Yet, its impact was immeasurable. It sold over 20,000 copies in its first year. It laid the foundation for one of the most revered and influential gaming franchises of all time, spawning 8 major sequels and culminating in the groundbreaking Ultima Online, one of the first successful MMORPGs. Its innovations, the expansive overworld, character customization, a persistent world, and a blend of fantasy and sci-fi, became pillars of the CRPG genre. Playing Ultima 1 today is more than just a historical curiosity. It's an experience that reveals the very foundations upon which modern RPGs are built. It's a reminder that even the grandest adventures begin with a single, pixelated step into the Age of Darkness. I'm glad I experienced Ultima 1, because it has given me insight into how the genre developed from here. I also think it was quite fun in some of its core elements, like the overworld exploration. The core gameplay didn't change a whole lot from Akalabeth, and Richard Garriot himself jokingly said that he spent 15 years making the same game again and again. But saying that would be unfair, because the game evolved around those gameplay pillars. It didn't just propose them again to sell to the same people. Garriott said in different interviews that most big companies make a successful game, then redo it for the second entry of the series to be sure to sell again. But in doing so, they cater to a subset of the players who enjoyed the first game, so it's not a good strategy. I kind of agree with this take. epic. I guess every one of us is thinking of a series that behaved exactly like this. In Ultima, we still move around the overworld to visit towns for our shopping needs, castles for quests, and dungeons for killing monsters. But while Akalabeth was essentially a roguelike experience of dungeon delving, here we have genuine wilderness exploration and an overarching quest that glues everything together. True, it's not very well explained, but we can see the evolution of the original concept. One critique that we can actually level at this game is that it can feel disconnected between the fantasy and sci-fi parts. Ultima really feels like a general catalog of the nerdy interests of a young college student, putting together his D&D passion and Star Wars elements with no real glue to hold them together. And yet, this game feels like a time capsule for those specific years, both in gaming and cinema. The Empire Strikes Back is exactly from 1980, when Ultima was being developed, and it was a big hit. I can only imagine how many times a young Garriott went to the movies to see the first two Star Wars films, and how influenced he was by them. The series will drop the space combat part in later games, but will keep sci-fi elements here and there. But this is a tale for the next Ultima video. Thank you so much for watching and for joining me on this journey back to the first Age of Darkness. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.